Welcome back to Aliyah Yomi. Today we're going to be learning Bechukosai Shvi, the seventh and last Aliyah in Parshas Bechukosai, and also the last Aliyah of Sefer Vayikra. Our Aliyah is 6 psukim long, running from Perek Chav Zayin Pasuk Chav Tes to Lamed Daled. The main topic is the Cherem. However, we will touch on different types of Maaser as well. The basic overview of our Aliyah is in the first pasuk says a very strong statement, where it says, Kol Cherem, any Cherem, which we talked about as some sort of hekdesh dedication, that is made min ha'adam, on a person, lo yipadeh, cannot be redeemed, mos yumos, that person must die. Very strange what that means. We'll come back to that in a moment. Then we hear about Ma'asar ha'aretz, the tithe of the land. This is referring to, as is understood by the Mefarshim, referring to Ma'aser Sheni. There's the first tithe is given to the Levium. The second tithe is brought to Yerushalayim to be eaten there by the owners. It just has a level of added kedusha which requires it to be eaten in Yerushalayim. But if a person is not able to bring it to Yerushalayim, they may redeem it onto money and use that money in Yerushalayim. But there has to be an added fifth, as when one is redeeming that which is holy. Then we hear about the end of the Aliyah, about the idea of Ma'aser Bakar Vatzon, the tithing of one's livestock. What happens is one puts them in a pen, allows them to come out, and Kol Asher Yavor Tachas HaShavet, anything which comes out under the rod, the 10th one will be holy to Hashem, and a person can't make any choices and say, I'll give these 10 scrawny ones. A person has to take whatever comes out 10th as well. And finally, the Torah concludes the Sefer by saying, Eile HaMitzvos, these are the commandments, Asher Tzivah Hashem es Moshe, that Hashem commanded Moshe, El Bnei Yisrael, to the nation of Israel, Bahar Sinai, on the mountain of Sinai, thereby closing the loop on the beginning of Parshas Bahar, which is where this whole section started. Bahar and Bechukosai forming one unit here as well. Now let's just understand this. What is this Cherem that's being described here? In the previous Aliyah, there was a Cherem described that was sounds like some sort of hekdesh on a person's property. Here we hear a Cherem which talks about a person dying for. What does that mean exactly? So Rav Hirsch points out that the notion of Cherem actually is a little bit different to that of hekdesh. Hekdesh is where I dedicate something to the Beis Hamikdash, and if it happens to be a kosher animal, which can be a korban, it'll become a korban. But if it's not, which in many cases it's not, the person is dedicating their piano, as an example, that goes to the Berek HaBayis fund, the Beis Hamikdash fund, and that goes for many things, including the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash as well. So when a person says a cherem, Rashi had pointed out that it could be two recipients, the Kohanim or the Beis Hamikdash. The cherem actually is slightly different in this following sense. As Rav Hirsch points out, when something is holy, when something is hekdesh, it has two elements to it. One is it has added level of kedusha, that's a positive value, and the other is that it cannot be used for any mundane activity. That's the negative outcome of that. When it comes to regular hekdesh, the first idea is accentuated, that it's holy, it's special. The second idea is implied, that you can't use it for mundane activities. When it comes to a cherem seems to be primarily exclusatory. The second idea is being accentuated of its not being able to use the mundane activity, and the first idea of being holy is implied. So it's a more severe and restrictive type of dedication as well. Now, what does it mean that the person will die if they made into a cherem? Very strange statement. What does that mean exactly? Rashi says we're talking about a very unusual situation. Not that making a cherem means to say that you need to kill somebody, God forbid, but it's referring to a person who makes a cherem of a dead person. What does that mean? A person who's on death row, they've just been sentenced to death by Beis Din, and a person says, I will give the value of that person, or the person on death row says, I'll give the value of myself to the Beis Hamikdash. In that case, it doesn't work. There's no value which a person can render to the holiness, in this case, because the person has already been decreed to be put to death. So it's a very specific case. It's not that this dedication is causing the death. It is not valid because the person is going to be put to death. That's where Rashi understands, quoting the Sifra and the Midrash and the Gemara in Erechin Daf Vov. However, the Ramban says that perhaps what's referred to over here is two versions of how a cherem can work. This is a very famous and very important Ramban. The Ramban says is if a person says that something I own is a cherem, that becomes holy like hekdesh. So a person owns a cow, a person owns a piano, a person says this is a cherem, it belongs to the Beis Hamikdash now. That's version one of cherem. But let's say a person makes a cherem of something which is not theirs. Then in that case, actually, the dedication over there is in order to destroy it rather than to utilize it. So as an example, we will see many cases of this, is it is of the interest of the machrim, the person making the cherem. They don't want to use it. They want to make sure this is not usable. Very famous and very obvious example is in Parshas Chukas, when the nation of Israel are attacked by, unbeknownst to them, it is the nation of Amalek, but they're dressed up as Canaanites. The Bnei Israel, the reason why the Canaanites dress up as Canaanites is they want Israel to pray to God for success over the wrong people. The nation of Israel are confused by the fact that they hear one language, see a different dress, and they say to Hashem, if you're going to give this nation, because I don't know which nation it is, BRD, I'll make a cherem their cities. That does not mean to say that we're making them part of the Beis Hamikdash. That means to say we're going to burn them down to the ground, because we're not going to take anything from this. This is not going to be a battle for profit. That's when it doesn't belong to oneself as well. Other examples of where a cherem is used in this kind of context is the end of Sefer Shoftim. Not the Parshas Shoftim, but the book of Shoftim in Nach, where there is a civil war in which the tribes of Israel believe that Binyamin is acting out or defending murderers and rapists, and they call upon all of Israel to fight against Binyamin, and everybody comes to this battle except for one little area called Yavesh Gilad, which is on the Transjordan. They do not come to this battle. But after the battle is finished and almost the entire tribe of Binyamin is wiped out in a terrible civil war, at that point in time, they go to the city of Yavesh Gilad and they kill all of them, except for the women. Why do they kill them, or how could they be doing this? Says the Ramban, because they made a cherem. They said that anybody who doesn't come to this battle is in cherem. That was what the leadership had said at that time. And because Yavesh Gilad ignored that call under a cherem, they were liable for death. Another example of Mois Sumos. In this way, the Ramban's looking at it. The cherem over here is actually prescriptive, not descriptive. So unlike Rashi, who's saying the cherem is not effective on a person who's already been put to death, here, when a person is making a cherem on a situation like this, where let's say people don't come to battle, there's a cherem upon them, or they're going to fight the enemies, and there's a cherem upon the enemies, that means to say they are going to reduce them, are going to destroy them as well. This is another example the Ramban says in Tanakh, is in Sefer Shmuel, where Yonatan is going to be killed. What happens is he goes out to battle with his arms bearer, fight a miraculous battle. Shaul HaMelech is in the rear guard, and he wants to pursue the enemies, and he makes a cherem that nobody should eat anything until they capture the enemies, because he wants to make sure nobody's sitting down to eat lunch. He wants everybody to capture the enemies while the miracle is ongoing. Yonatan, not hearing this shavua, tastes from the honey in the Ya'aros Devash, in this particular honey-laden forest. At which point in time, when this is found out, Shaul feels that he is compelled to kill Yonatan. Why is he killing Yonatan? Because until the nation save his son. Why is that? Because he made a cherem. Again, this was almost a vow or shavua of death to be put upon people who do a certain action or in a certain locale. The Ramban goes on to explain, and unfortunately the Ramban does not have a long and extensive commentary on Nevi'im and Ksuvim, but we do get his commentary in places like this where he expands, and he explains that, in fact, this is what went wrong with Yiftach in Sefer Shoftim. Yiftach comes back from a very successful campaign in the Transjordan against Moab and Ammon, and he says, anything that comes out of my house, the first thing that comes out will be to Hashem, will be dedicated to Hashem. And unfortunately, what walked out first of his house was his own dear daughter, and there's disputes as to how to read the continuing psukim, but either he kills her or he bans her and leaves her to live a celibate life. But the tragic, each way tragic in his own way. What was the mistake here? Says the Ramban, he was completely mistaken, because he thought the cherem was based on this pasuk in Ar Aliyah, that any cherem which was made to Hashem should be killed. He thought it was prescriptive in this case, and that was incorrect. You cannot make a cherem about a person to kill in such a way. It does not work. You can elevate people, you can elevate their values, but you can't make a cherem of a person to kill them or to make them celibate, and that's why Yiftach was punished for actually carrying on this particular line of action. Finally, it's interesting to point out that Ramban does quote that Chazal do include many mitzvahs in our pasuk. So one example, as Rashi had said, not to evaluate a person on death row. Another one is making enemies or property into a cherem, and the other one is not transgressing the words of a king or based in. All that the Chazal see all of those words in this single pasuk as well. Two more questions. Number one is why does Maaseh Brahema need to go under the rod? Surely you can just you go look at your cattle, count up, and say, oh, there's 100 of them, so I'm going to give a tenth, 10 of them to to Maaser. Why do I need to do this whole process of letting them out and then putting down the rod and slapping some paint on the 10th one? Why is that necessary? So the first it seems to be a pragmatic issue of lo yivake ben tov l'ra, as the pasuk says, that you shouldn't choose between good and bad, because what will end up happening is you'll give the most the smallest and the most diseased of your animals you'll give to Maaser. That's not the way it works. It's going to be completely random. Another part is that a person gets more of a sense of appreciation of what they have when they have to count 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's all me. Kodesh Baruch Hu, you gave that to me. I'll give one to you. Putting that in perspective is not like giving 10 animals. It's like keeping 90. And that's why psychologically it works as well. Finally, one very interesting aspect that we'll conclude with that Aliyah on a more spiritual level. The Gemara in Shabbos tells us to have Kuf Daled Amud Aleph, a very interesting observation. It says, Man tzafach tzofim amrum. Mantzafach. What is mantzafach? That refers to the 5 letters in the Hebrew alphabet which have what's called sofiyos, letters which are changed somewhat when they are at the end of a letter. So the idea is like this. There are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. However, there really are 27 because there's another 5 permutations of them. What are they? The mem sophist, the nun sophist, the tzadi sophist, the pe sophist, and the chav sophist. Those are all what's called sofiyos, and their acronym is mantzafach. Those are the 5 letters which have a permutation when they are at the end of the word. So the Gemara says, who said these? So the Gemara says, Tzofim Amarnum. The Tzofim, this is obviously a play on words from Mantzafach. The Tzofim means the prophets or the seers, they introduced them. The Gemara says, that doesn't make sense. The prophets cannot add any extra Torah laws. How do we know that? From the last pasuk in our Aliyah, in our Parsha, and in our Sefer, which is Eile HaMitzvos. These are the commandments Hashem said to Moshe at Har Sinai, and nobody else is able to Rishai Lechadish B'Davar, to introduce new laws. You can make rabbinic laws, you can expand, make protections, you can do drashas, but you can't make new Torah-based laws. So the Gemara says, well, actually, what happened was originally these were actually given at Sinai as well. But the prophets were the ones to unjumble them, because what happened was there was a loss in tradition as to which version of the letter should go at the end of the letter and which version of the letter should go at the beginning of or in the middle of the word. And therefore, the prophets unjumbled that and told us which one to use at the end. What does that mean exactly? So, couldn't some linguists or grammarians fix that for us as well? So Rav Kook explains in a very powerful essay in Rosh Milin, he says the following observation. If you look at all the sofiyos, all the letters which have different permutation at the end of the word, almost all of them are where the letter is cramped up, like the nun, the tzadi, the pei, and the chaf, all have their line at the bottom is cramped up onto the line. It's bent over onto the line. At the end of the word, it's allowed to be elongated. It goes down straight. It's expansive. The mem, which is not like that, the mem in its regular form in the middle or the beginning of the word has a pesucha. It has got a gap at the bottom of it. When it's at the end of the word, it is satuma. It is closed, or the word sasum also means depth. It has depth, or it's got a secret to it. What the Tzofim were doing, what the prophets were saying is that Jewish history needs to be seen at the end. During the process of Jewish history, things are cramped, things are complicated, they don't add up, there's holes in things, it's very hard to see. The Tzofim are reminding us that at the end of the story, at the end of the word, when we get to the final destination, then we'll be able to see the full expansion of those ideas. We'll be able to see the full circle of everything coming full circle around. And that's what the Gemara is saying. They didn't introduce them, they remind us that this is where the end of the journey is. And sometimes we make the mistake of looking at the journey in the middle and misunderstanding it on that basis. With this we conclude Parshas Bechukosai and the 7th Aliyah, and also Sefer Vayikra. In the meantime, have a wonderful, meaningful day and an incredible Shabbos.